Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Joining me, of course, she is the proprietor of the Uber blog Hullabaloo and the columnist at salon.com, Digby or Heather Parton. Heather, it's been a little bit of a while since we've talked, and things are dramatically different, I would say.
Absolutely. It feels like years, Sam. I think it's only been, a month or so, but it feels like years since we last spoke. A lot has happened in the past 10 years, otherwise known as a month.
I mean, we had about a 2 week run there of I don't know where I get that little thumbs up came up. Um, we had a 2 week run there where we had an assassination attempt. Well, I guess, if you want to extend it to the month, we had the debate, which
Right.
completely essentially um, uh, changed the tenor of how everyone was perceiving Joe Biden. And then we had an assassination attempt, and then we had the Republican National Convention, and then we had a Joe Biden dropping out, and then Kamala Harris essentially clearing the field. Um, and I mean, aside from just like a sheer eventfulness, we say this almost every week now, or every time we talk. We've been having these type of conversations for 20 years, I think, on air at least.
Hmm.
And I don't remember a 4 week period where 4.5 week period where things dramatically changed so much. And particularly like what we're seeing in terms of the polls, but I don't know where to start. Let's start with, I guess, let's start with the convention, because that was sort of
Okay.
like the densest period of time. I don't recall ever a a political convention where the lead candidate and their vice presidential pick came out of it in worse shape than they went in, at least in terms of polling. Right? 1968. I was barely sentient, but I was alive. But I mean, this is pretty stunning.
Completely stunning. And to be frank with you, unexpected as far as I was concerned, because going into the convention, we had the Sturm und Drang among the Democrats over Biden's debate performance, whether he was going to stay in, people pushing him to get out, going through that whole thing. And so the Democrats, I thought, were just, in a terrible situation. I mean, and we were, it was awful. And then there was the assassination attempt. And I thought, oh, Trump is going to be waving the bloody shirt and the country will rally around. And if you observe the mainstream media right after the assassination attempt going into the convention, they were beside themselves. Oh, this is the most horrible thing that's ever happened. We must condemn the violence and blah blah blah, which was just a softball throw to Trump going into his convention, and then he shows up with the bandage on his ear and this whole thing. I I expected that he was going to come out with a substantial bump. I really did. I thought he was going to do it. Now, even with the choice of JD Vance, which I thought was stupid, and I said it at the time, I wrote about it. I'm going, this was not a good choice. He had many other options that were better than this, and he went with the worst choice that he had. But even with that, I thought he would come out with a big bump. And he didn't. And I mean, this just sort of reinforces the idea that Trump has a ceiling, and that nothing he does can actually take him above that ceiling. So everything, in terms of him winning, has to be about, suppressing the polling for the other side, and maybe third party, kind of, interference in that sense. But I'm telling you, I was very surprised. Having said that, it was the worst convention I've ever seen.
It
It was
was
absolutely appallingly bad.
it was let's just talk about that for a moment, because there was a couple of things I was trying. I mean, the speech itself was absolute garbage. I
Oh my
mean,
God.
just absolute garbage. He didn't like, even from his perspective, they had it in their mind clearly, and they have doubled down on this since, that the way they were going to win was to rack up the number of male votes they could get.
Yes.
They were going totally on this gender split. A couple of weeks ago, there was some polling that showed in the younger cohort, I don't think it was 18 to 24, maybe it was, that there was a huge gender split, and Trump was winning quite well. I mean, big, like I'm talking like 20, 30 points
Yeah.
in terms of men at that age. Now, I don't know how sustainable that was, and how much of that was a function of Biden as opposed to, if that's changed.
Yeah.
But let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that that was their broader
Hmm.
strategy, not just that age cohort, but just across the board. Um, it certainly felt like that was their strategy. I mean, they have all these wrestling figures on, which was bizarre. And then the other thing that really struck me over the course of two or three of those nights, you don't usually see the nominee there
No.
in the convention. And this was more reminiscent of a like a Roman like a Roman Colosseum, where they were
You're
all
right.
like going by on chariots and
And he's up there doing this and this.
exactly tipping their hat to the Caesar.
Yeah.
And I found that very, very strange. And I don't know if it wasn't for, the moment, I think, like where he blew a kiss to Hulk Hogan. Um, and that's when it really felt like, oh my gosh, like this is exactly what this is. Like
Yeah.
the knight, or not the knight, but the warrior,
The
is
gladiators. Yeah, they
gladiators
were.
slain the podium, I guess. And the king, Caesar, like throws his
Yes.
handkerchief down or whatever. It was really just a bizarre show.
Very strange.
And then Vance, I mean, I had predicted Vance only because Vance came with a tremendous amount of money. I am quite convinced
Right.
that
Right. Of
Elon
course.
Musk was there because of the Vance pick, not
Hmm.
because of the assassination attempt. Peter
Hmm.
Thiel is in there, Andreessen and Horowitz, and all
Yep.
the crypto money. I mean, on
Hmm.
day one, after picking Vance, he raised $500 million. Now, they didn't make a big show of it because it wasn't in the way that, like, you get
Hmm.
fundraisers type of stuff. It was more like, all right, I've secured, in the same way that David Koch, I think it was, bought his way onto the Libertarian ticket back in
Hmm.
1982, like literally became the vice president, or I guess RFK's vice president too. I don't even know her name. But it was her money that got her there.
Yep.
And, and then things just completely implode for Vance, because this guy has no I mean, and we'll talk a little bit about this. Like, I think there is a knock on Kamala Harris that she has never really established any real positions that seem to be solid and cast in
Hmm.
iron. But JD Vance is even like worse, and like he's done
Oh my God.
180s, not 90 degrees. Like, I'm for this and now I'm against it. But from like, I'm for this and now I'm for the exact opposite. Like, I don't know, Hitler, in his words.
Exactly. And it's a total change in worldview. This isn't just, tweaking your policies to try and appeal to certain constituencies within your coalition, which is what, politicians do. Rightly or wrongly, some of them do it more clumsily than others. This is, I'm kind of a liberal, never Trumper, libertarian kind of guy, very antagonistic toward Trump and the MAGA people. Within a year or two, he is suddenly their avatar. I mean, it's so abrupt and so incredibly obvious and so calculated that he did this, and that I can't believe anybody would take him seriously on either side, because nobody knows what he is. I mean, he is like an empty vessel. Now, when you're looking now, as people are looking at him, and I think it is good to kind of take a look at him, because I think it's a very interesting part of what's going on in Trump world and in the MAGA movement, is that this guy is he he brings with him all the money. And that's
Yep.
just, I agree with you completely. That is the primary objective here. There's a bunch of money there, and these guys are all kind of crazy. I mean, they really are. That group of tech bros, Peter Thiel and Andreessen and the rest of them, I mean, they're kind of nutty. And there's a lot of stuff out there that people should read about these guys
Oh, Peter
because
Thiel is a complete lunatic. I mean,
it's out of their mind. Yeah.
Straussian anti-democrat. I mean, not not implicitly anti-democratic,
No,
explicitly anti-democratic
yeah,
because he believes he has on record saying that I believe, one of the problems with democracy is you start to give the vote to people like women.
yeah.
And I'm not, again, I am barely paraphrasing. I think this is pretty you give he said one other group of people,
Hmm.
and I imagine it's not white men. But you give the vote to them, and then the next thing you know, you got socialism. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's okay.
He
Uh,
said that. No, he did say that.
we
And
should
they
be so
said things
lucky, in my estimation, but
right.
it is a interesting
If
perspective.
only, if
Yep.
only that
Yep.
actually was how it worked. But no, I mean, I mean, the things that these guys believe in, I mean, and they've got some weird utopian stuff. They're building special techno cities that they will be running like their own little fiefdoms and creating some kind of utopian techno vision. I mean, they're out there. They're very much out there. And Vance is one of their creatures. He is one that they've groomed to sort of carry that message, and he was designed to go into politics because of this. But he personally is a cipher. He is just I think he's an instrument of those people, and he is a very very unskilled politician. Let's just put it that way. He is not good at this. And they did not vet that part of him because I don't think they cared. I think at the time this was happening, I mean, all the stories were that Trump was listening. I thought he might pick Doug Burgum, that they'd be the businessman ticket. He's a billionaire, I'm a billionaire, we'll make y'all billionaires. I mean, I thought that might be, I
Right.
mean, it's stupid, but it makes some sense. Marco Rubio, he's Latino, maybe he brings in something. He's maybe an establishment guy that the suburban moms might think is cute or something. I mean, none of this is, I mean, they're all horrible and they're all useless, but they had some
I just think
logic to
almost
them.
there was a lot of logic to bringing on somebody who would be a foil for Donald Trump in that respect, but it's also completely contrary to. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the thing that I think is fundamental about Donald Trump. His racism is real. I mean, and
Oh, absolutely.
it is so real that he won't even put it won't even trump what might be, forgive the pun, his own best interests.
Yeah.
I mean, the
He can't
smartest
help
pick for
himself.
him,
Yeah.
no, the smartest pick in the world would have been to him to pick, a Latino, a person of color,
Tim
a
Scott, something.
woman.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
all of those things, and that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just never going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, there was no other choice. We knew it was going to be a white man, and I thought there were a few. I mean, party's full of them. I mean, he had some to choose from. Picking Vance though was just, I mean, he went with the
It was money.
choice of, it was money, and I think they were at that point. I think at the point where he was making the final choice there. I mean, Rupert Murdoch reportedly flew people in to beg him not to pick Vance. I mean, to beg him not to do it. And to pick Burgum was his choice. He thought that would be great. He came to the convention himself, Rupert did. And what is he, 112? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think flying around is that. He shows up to try and convince him to do it. And Trump just could not do it. He needed that money. He wanted that money.
Yep.
And I think he also wanted he and all the MAGA people around him, including his sons, Tucker Carlson, that whole group, they convinced themselves that going with a hardcore MAGA message was the way to win. And they thought they had it won, I think, at that point when the convention started. They were convinced that it was done. For some unknown reason, they did not believe that Joe Biden would drop out. And I have to assume that it's because Donald Trump couldn't imagine ever dropping out himself, that
Right.
no one would ever do that. So he just did that. So it was a very, very strange and odd
And to be
convention.
fair, to be fair, but I mean to Trump, it did seem after the assassination attempt like the brakes were going to be put on the
Yes.
move to get rid of Biden. Now, what it ended up being was they were just put on pause for about 3 days.
Hmm.
I mean, Biden. The irony of the whole thing is that Trump was done in by that assassination attempt, because had that attempt not happened, I'm quite convinced that Biden would have been he would have been gone by the beginning of that convention,
Right, right. I agree with
as
you.
opposed
Yeah,
to the end, and they
yeah,
may have made a different pick. Now,
yeah.
the problem that they would have had is like Doug Burgum, Biden drops out, and then you look at these two guys, and they're like the two guys up in the rafters of the Muppet Show.
Yeah,
All of
exactly.
a sudden, right? Like, I mean,
Right, you're right.
the problem that Donald Trump had, it seems, and to be clear, Donald Trump can win this election still. I mean, I want to
Oh,
just
of course.
make this
No,
absolutely
don't
clear,
kid
but I don't
yourself.
think
Yeah,
it's going to be. It's not the foregone conclusion that it felt like it was
yeah,
before the convention. And there is going to be, regardless of whether he shoots somebody on Fifth Avenue, there's going to be 46% of the country
absolutely.
minimum who are going to vote for him.
Yeah.
And then it's, there literally is such a tiny little contingency in the middle because of the electoral college. I happen to think that Kamala Harris is probably going to get more votes. Um, uh, uh, at least the spread is going to be greater than it was for Biden. I don't know if the total of votes is going to be greater,
Oh,
but
I
I
do
think the
too.
spread is going to be more. But um, the problem is that once Biden drops out, and this also was the case with Vance, because had he picked somebody like Burgum, they would both look old. But the whole strategy that Biden had was, we're going to run on this is going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. And the problem
Hmm.
was, of course, after the debate, it became a referendum on Joe Biden.
Right.
Once Vance is in there, all of a sudden the needle moves a little bit and it becomes a referendum a little bit on Vance, because
Hmm.
everybody's, it's all baked into the cake, Donald Trump. But how can you sort of like get some mileage talking about Vance? And then as soon as Biden drops out, it immediately reverts back to a referendum, and not just on Trump, but on Vance now. Because,
Yeah.
if it was Burgum, everybody would be like, we're going to still talk about Trump. But Vance became this surrogate for
Hmm.
Donald Trump criticism that was fascinating. And it turns out like he helped sort of like, I guess, midwife this whole weird thing, which is,
Yeah.
I know you must be enjoying this as much
Oh
as
my
I
God, are
am and
you
we are.
kidding? It's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing. And I absolutely love it that I think there was an organic aspect to this where once it got started, and I guess they're giving credit to Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor. I don't know, is that true or
Well, Emma has did some digging and found that back in 2019 and 2020, Kamala Harris was running against was referring to Donald Trump as weird.
really? Oh,
And
good.
I
Good for her.
suspect what happened is Walls, and I want to talk about this aspect too, because it's crazy. We have like a primary going on for the vice presidency, but one of the most sort of productive and effective primaries that
It's
could ever exist.
fabulous.
But I think what happened is Walls was out there
Uh-huh.
trying to, lobby for
Sure.
himself as
Oh,
vice
for sure.
president. We should say this is going to air. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon. It's going to air on Friday. We may know who the vice
Right.
president is by this time. Um, Walls, I think, went back, looked at how she was running before,
Ooh,
and
smart guy.
this is my guess. This is my
Could
guess.
be.
I don't know.
Yeah,
This is
could
what
be.
we were talking in the office, and may have said, okay, I'm going to use weird because, I'm trying to. I have an audience
Sure.
of one and then millions,
Right.
and so, but regardless, it stuck.
It was brilliant. And the way, I mean, however it started, it sort of came out of that and then just kind of caught on instantly. And they started doing really clever, you know, fun. I mean, I think it was Rick Perlstein who said on Twitter, he sort of popped in at some point and said, you know, it's good when politics is fun. And it's especially good when it's for people on our side because it's been so
Yeah.
incredibly awful for so long with Donald Trump just dominating everything and even Biden having a successful presidency in many ways that we didn't anticipate. Even that there's never been this moment of just kind of great sort of happiness about the politics of it because it's just been a slog no
I feel
matter
like
what
we
you say.
had about a month after the American Rescue Plan
Yeah,
was
that was
passed
it.
in February of 2021. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember you and
right.
I were talking. We're
Yeah,
like,
we're going, yay,
oh my
go.
gosh, they're talking about Dr. Seuss, and the Democrats
Right,
just passed $2 trillion worth of,
right.
benefits to people
Yeah,
practically.
yeah. Wow, child care tax credits. I mean,
Yep.
it was very, that was a moment of sort of unexpected, upbeat positivity in politics. And we just have not had any of that in so long. I mean, really, you go back to the original Obama campaign, I think, is the
Right.
last time anybody
Yep.
felt, that kind of joy. And I'm not suggesting it's the same now, but there was, I think, I mean, my theory on this is what happened was, that debate was just, I mean, it was one of the most devastating political events I have ever lived through. It was stunningly awful, and it scared the living hell out of me, because from that moment, I just realized everything's changed, and whatever I thought was possible in this race is, I don't know if it's going to. And I wrote the next day, I said, I don't know if he's going to drop out. I mean, I put it on the table and said, let's not sugarcoat it. This was horrible. And if he does, we're going to have to grapple with what comes next. And my view was, and I don't know if you guys agreed with this, but my view, and in my column, I wrote, I think we don't have time to go through a huge process. So we have to,
100%.
come in. Let's all get together. Let's do this right. Let's be, professional. Let's be organized, and let's just get through this moment. If he drops out, we're just going to have to, really, we can't play any games here. We can't do it. We don't have time. And so, but it was a devastating moment to me. I mean, I really felt like, oh my God, Donald Trump is really going to win. And that scared me to death. So going through that 3 weeks of hell that we went through, trying to figure out what was going to happen, and the assassination attempt or whatever, when he dropped out, it was like the relief of finding out that the biopsy is benign. It's one of
Right.
those kind of
Right.
moments where you
Right.
just go, oh my God. And what that brings you is this great sense of possibilities, and life looks so much brighter, and everything just kind of, and that's what happened. And I think it just spurred some creativity on the Democratic side that I haven't seen. And that's rhetorical creativity. I mean, look at these videos of these guys doing the, white dudes for Kamala, or the black women for Kamala, these phone calls, these Zooms that they're doing. I mean, everybody just sounds, excited and happy.
Yeah.
And it's
I
just
mean,
not something I've seen very much.
I think it is that we moved into the generation to a different generation of politicians who were
Yes.
dominating this discourse, who fundamentally understand. I mean, ideologically, they're all over the place, I think, to a certain extent, but they fundamentally understand that the first thing they have to be is partisan. That
Yes.
they cannot, the idea that we have to show respect to these people
Right.
as a sort of baseline and then
Hmm.
make the criticism. I think that is
Right.
just not something that was something that was frankly from an earlier generation, for
Hmm.
people who basically cut their teeth in politics in the, 80s and 90s,
Oh,
and
60s and 70s,
well,
some of them,
60s and
yeah.
70s, I mean, I think, but really sort of like who their politics were defined in the wake of the McGovern loss. And,
Right.
and,
I,
and
I
so
see.
much
Yeah, I
was
see what
that,
you're saying. Yeah.
and that became the idea of like, we need to be respectable. We
Hmm.
need to be the adults in the room. We have to sort of like throw off this sort of like coat of hippiedom,
Right.
and that dictated so much, and that is gone now. We do not
Yeah.
have a represent, Chuck Schumer almost was like mentored by these people, but
Hmm.
he's just he's a little bit sort of like,
I would say Dick Durbin is the perfect
well,
example of that.
yes, Dick Durbin still remains.
Yeah.
There's definitely a couple leaders in the Senate, but they're not,
No, they're not
Dick,
dominant anymore. They're
they're
not
not
dominant.
dominant.
Yeah.
Dick Durbin, aside from him, putting the brakes on the ability to put more judges on the court, Dick Durbin is not dictating the
No,
tenor of the politics of the Democratic
not at
Party.
all.
Neither is Pelosi, for that matter,
No.
or Hoyer, or none of these people,
Yeah.
and or the Clintons, for that matter,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Agreed.
were a little bit better on partisanship, frankly, than a lot of them. But I think that's why you also get this type of
Yeah.
thing. I just don't think the politicians of 10 years ago on the Democratic Party had the constitution that would allow them to say these people are weird.
Right.
Like,
Well, look at Tom Friedman. I mean, Tom Friedman, the avatar of all the sensible liberals in the world, supposedly, wrote a column saying Democrats are going to regret saying that calling the Republicans weird.
oh, I didn't see that, but that
Oh,
completely
he's
tracks.
yeah, totally tracks. He's the guy, and he's out there saying, "Oh no," and all the New York Times, people are at Twitter going, "Oh my goodness." Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, that's not the world we're living in, and calling them weird is an extremely successful political move. It is
Totally.
absolutely successful, and it's energizing to our side, freaking out their side. I mean,
They
they
have no
do.
response to it because they
They don't know
don't.
what to do.
Well, the problem is they don't really know why they're weird. Like you and I both come from sort of like milieus where, you know, weird is actually an attribute, like a positive
Yeah.
attribute. And that's because those people know they're weird.
Hmm.
They know why they're weird and they take pride in it. These people do not know why they're weird. They don't know why it's weird to say um, women, who don't have children in families and, women really shouldn't be, full citizens if they, I mean, they don't know why it's weird.
No. Well,
They're
there's fun
responding
weird.
it, huh? They're
There's fun
defensively.
weird, and then there's creepy weird, and they're
Ex-
creepy weird. You know.
exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
And it's been incredibly effective. All right, let's just talk, I mean, briefly about like this. And the amazing thing is the polls are all reflecting this. Like
Yes.
everything has flipped. Her favorability rating flipped.
Hmm.
And one of the things, that I will say that not only did we agree with you that there was just the idea of like a mini primary was both stupid as a practical matter, stupid as a political matter, and also stupid as a small d democratic matter. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not a real democracy to have
No.
like, it's the closest thing you could get is the person who, was the backup to voted to be the backup
81
of the
million people voted for the backup, and it turned out we
ex-
needed a backup. So.
exactly. And so but the other thing is that, and I think this, we can talk a little bit more about Kamala Harris's, sort of positions and whatnot, but they just don't know how to deal with race. And, like
Oh my God.
they were able to sort of promote a threat of misogyny with Hillary Clinton for, I think, for two reasons. One, because I think misogyny is just much more casually accepted
Hmm.
in our society. But they had a 30-year sort of
Right.
like exhibition game, essentially, to create narratives that were where the misogyny was subtextual.
Hmm.
They did
Right.
not have the time to do this with Kamala Harris. And so they start off with the DEI stuff. They literally, I mean, day 2 or 3 of her presumptive, even candidacy, they're having to have a meeting that is publicly reported where they're saying, don't
No.
be overtly racist or misogynist. Like, that's insane. That is insane that you need to do that. And they did need to do that, and it didn't work
Right.
because they had nothing else to talk about.
Yeah. And that's
And
their thing. I mean, this is their thing. DEI is their thing. This is what they've been saying it over and over again on Fox News. It's been Tucker Carlson's, sort of, fundamental argument for years now. I mean, this is what they do. It starts CRT, DEI. They've always got some woke. I mean, this is their culture war. They don't know how to do any politics that isn't that. And the fact that they had to do this in a meeting at the House of Representatives. I mean, these were the professional elected politicians had to be say, hey, ixnay on the EEI day stay, stop it. Stop doing that. And of course they couldn't. And of course, Donald Trump, as you said earlier, he just is a racist to his bones. He is a misogynist to his bones. He's been found liable for rape and defamation of a woman. He's been accused of, we heard what he said, on the Access to Hollywood tape. So the misogyny's there and the race is there. This thing he pulled this week at the National Association of Black
journalists,
Broadcasters,
yeah.
journalists, was unbelievable. I mean, I think he did it on purpose. It's obvious that they had this ready to roll out, this idea that she's not real. He wants to do a Pocahontas thing, right, with her. She's not real. She's faking her blackness. And it'll work with some people on Fox. They'll also, oh, she's not a real black woman, whatever. But
Well, they
then
did this
stop
with
and
Obama too.
Yeah, of
But he
course.
was
It's the
only half
birther
black,
thing.
and yeah,
And it's the birther thing. He's not legit. This is not a legitimate person. She's a phony. She doesn't, in fact, JD Vance came out and said, well, she's a complete phony. The chutzpah of JD Vance, of all people, coming out, well, she's a chameleon. Nobody really knows who she is. And I'm going, oh my God, Mr. I know you are, but what am I, JD Vance? Because there's a guy who's truly a chameleon.
Well, the problem is, again, they don't have a narrative that the phony thing backs into. I mean, it actually, could have more resonance with, I think, like sort of like the most progressive elements of the Democratic Party. But like, she's a phony what? Like, she's a phony what? The only thing they have
A phony
brought up
black woman.
that she's a phony black person, and like, there's no, there's no with when they tried this, and they tried this with everybody, right? I mean, like the Slick Willie, they did it with Bill Clinton, and the idea with Slick Willie was that he doesn't really care about you,
Right.
But the sort of like incredibly fortuitous thing about this is there is no sort of like a predicate for who Kamala Harris is. And everyone was waiting for just something that wasn't going to give them license not to vote against Donald Trump.
Right.
So like, and she is doing that. Like,
Yeah.
in fact, I think there was a quote from Willie Brown, who, has been out of touch, but they try and bring it back because apparently they slept together, 40 years ago or something like this. And he said, my advice would be for her to not take any positions. And which, as a progressive who wants to begin to like, shift and box her in on certain positions, frankly, I am, it's an anathema to me. But as someone who wants Donald Trump to lose and thinks that's, vitally crucial, I think that happens to be probably the best electoral strategy. Make this about Donald Trump and JD Vance. And that's where we are. I mean, they're going to try the phony thing, but Donald Trump let the cat out of the bag. Now, every time that they see phony, he's already provided the subtext.
Exactly.
And, like it's fascinating to see how bad they are at this when, it's not like sort of a surprise, and they have somebody who can at least just sort of like not be the story, which Joe Biden couldn't be. Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.